Hi, listeners. Welcome to the She Speaks Life podcast, a weekly encouragement where we share our God stories. I'm your host, Jayme Elizabeth, and I am so glad you are spending time with us today to listen. Hi there. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm so glad you chose to listen today. It's going to be a great one as we join with my guest, Natalie Hixson, and hear her story on discouragement, burnout, and destructive anger that can destroy us moms from living in the fullness of the present. And at the end, stay tuned because she's going to share how you can get her trigger tracker that can help anyone overcome those destructive anger issues and whatnot. I can't wait to hear more about it. Hi, Natalie. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited about you sharing this topic because it's not one that many of us want to talk about. If we do struggle with anger as moms, we feel guilty, we feel shameful, may feel like we're the only one that is going through this. And let's just start off with, I can totally relate. I had to go through it. I had littles and I was just overwhelmed with 3 under the age of 5. And anger was just surfacing. And I remember having to go through the root of where is this anger coming from? And I'm sure you're going to share probably some of that as well. So I would love to hear how it started for you. Just start us off. How many kids you got and where you live, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. So I live in Bozeman, Montana, and born and raised in Montana. And I have 3 girls. We have a 18-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 10, or I guess she'll be 11 soon.
No.
Yeah, and married my high school sweetheart. We started dating at 16, and
That's
really
us
the
too.
Oh, really? That's so
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, 20 years this year, married
Yeah.
anyways.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, for me, I'm one of those who grew up with parents who they expressed their anger in a loud, reactive way, right?
Mhm.
And so there was yelling, there was slamming doors. That was how it was processed in our house. And I
Mhm.
didn't really think too much of a difference. Even though I dated my husband for 5 years before we got married, I didn't really see too much of a difference until we started living together, right? So after we got married and
Mhm.
moved in, here we get into our fights, and I would be screaming at him and he would be sitting there silent. And I'd just be like,
Yeah.
"Why are you yelling at me?" And he's just like, "That's not what I do."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I started to notice like there's something not normal or right here. And I would get so angry that I was even afraid to have kids. I wanted
Mhm.
kids, but I was afraid that, what would happen if I did have kids. That didn't stop us from having children. A couple of years after marriage, we brought our first home, Enya. And when she was about 2, you would see me and her on the floor throwing epic 2-year-old tantrums together. And crying, I'd be screaming and yelling and belittling and threatening her. I would leave bruises on her arm. I would leave handprints on her butt. I was very abusive and scary. And I, again, knew this wasn't right. I didn't like it. I would go to bed at night
Mhm.
feeling guilty, going, I won't do this tomorrow. I'm going to be a better mom tomorrow. And yet nothing would change. And
Mhm.
so I started to really put it on Enya. Like, if she would just listen to me, I wouldn't get so angry.
Mhm.
And so it was just not having this ability. I'm thinking I could change, but I can't. It wouldn't happen. And so it's got to be Enya to change, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I can relate to being brought up in a household where anger, you expressed it in loud voices. And
yes.
it got crazy loud. And so when you grow up, you think that's how you handle it. and then
Mhm.
you're passing on that same pattern in your own family.
Right.
And so mine was just the vocal yelling, at the kids or yelling at my husband that could have been handled in a milder way for sure. So, all right, fast forward a couple years. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no, you're fine. It's just that if you don't know how to handle it, if you've
Mhm.
never been able to figure out how to process, then you keep staying in those patterns, right? And we'll talk about the
Yeah.
moms who are listening out there who they're like, well, I didn't grow up in that environment and I wasn't angry till I had kids. We'll get to them in a minute.
Right, right. Yes.
But so the turning point really for me was, brought her sister home, um, and then one night I was nursing her sister, and Mike was putting Enya to bed, and Enya's throwing this epic tantrum. I'm sitting here getting angrier and angrier. I'm in a room with the door shut, and they're, down the hall. But all of a sudden, I just burst out like, Enya, shut up, just listen to daddy.
Yeah.
And Sky stops nursing and she looks at me with this horrible baby face and just starts
Oh.
bawling. And I'm like, something has
Oh.
to give. We can't
Yeah.
keep doing this. And
Mhm.
again, I'm placing it on Enya. Enya needs therapy. We're going to take her to therapy. So we took her to a therapist. She observed Enya and then she talked to Mike and I alone. And she's like, Enya's a perfectly normal kid for her age and development. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you're not at home with her. Of course you're going to say that.
Mm.
And she's like, I understand how you're feeling about it, but Natalie, you need to be in here to see me. So this woman, God used her to basically tell me, you're the one who has to change. And as hard as it was to hear it, it was really relieving that someone was saying, there's help for you.
Yeah.
And so 4 years of therapy, it was great, learned a lot about my family history and a lot of things, but I still had the pattern of yelling at my kids.
Mhm.
So it took, quite a little bit of a journey after that of personal growth, learning to walk with the Lord on a daily basis. And as He grew me and the fruits of the spirits grew within me, I did start to develop more of that calm, patient gentleness. I am not perfect. 2 days ago, I was a total bear, super overwhelmed by some stuff we've got going on with a remodel in the house. And
Yeah.
everybody got the wrath of mom. And by the end of the day, I was like, oh, y'all, I am so sorry. I had to take responsibility for how I treated everyone. And they were
Mhm.
so gracious and loving. And they're not used to that. That's not how mom always is. They see
Mhm.
that there's certainly different times, hormones, overwhelm, that I'll crawl back into my old patterns, right? And we all
Right.
have to watch for that. But on a regular daily basis, I'm able to work through these things without having all these explosions and being disrespectful and rude and all of that. And I'll just tell you real quick
Mhm.
too. Today, my relationship with Enya, she's the one who got the brunt of it, right? She's the one who really got the most abuse.
Mhm.
Um, my relationship with her is beautiful. It's absolutely not at all what I would have expected, knowing what she went through with me. God has been very restorative and redemptive, and she knows the story. She knows what abuse she had when she was little. And she knows that if ever anything surfaces for her that she thinks of, which at the moment, by God's grace, she doesn't remember anything, doesn't mean she
Mhm.
won't at some point. So
Mhm.
she knows if something surfaces, she needs to come back and talk to mom about it.
Mhm. Yeah. So good. Well, tell me the process that you had to go through to get the healing that you needed. Get to the root of why the anger, why is it boiling to that point?
Yeah. So Um, again, coping patterns, right? Learning what
Mhm.
you've learned in the past. So for someone like me who grew up with it, it was something that instinctively, this is how I process anger. And realized in therapy that I was basically stuck at a 2-year-old maturity level as far as processing emotions. And
Mm.
so as I learned to grow and take responsibility, I remember the therapist telling me, you have to be the adult. She was very blunt. She's like, you're not being the adult in the situation. So right now it's two
Mhm.
children. And I was like, oh, that
Mhm.
makes sense. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I need to be the adult. What's that look like? Well, what does it look like to be an adult? It's taking responsibility for your actions. It's not always going to be easy being a mom. There's going to be more difficult challenges being a mom than easy times, right? And we have
Mhm.
to rise to those occasions. And by taking responsibility for our own emotional healing, and
Mhm.
doing that by walking with the Lord, I mean, that is absolutely, absolutely critical.
Mhm.
When I work with clients, one of the number one things they know, you have to check in 3 to 4 times a week with me that you are spending time with the Lord, quality time. I don't care what
Mhm.
you do, that's between you and Him, but He's the one who's going to change your heart. It's not going to be me, and it's not going to be any book, podcast, course, coach.
Mhm.
God is the one who creates that change in you, and you have to follow through and surrender to Him. And so it was taking responsibility for my actions, learning to go back to my children and saying, you know what? It was okay that I was angry, but it was not okay that I just yelled at you. Please
Mhm.
forgive me for that. And then walking through, it's part of my recovery process with kids after we blow up, or your husband or anyone. I tell
Mhm.
my clients, go back, take responsibility first. I don't care what they did. I don't care what their part was in it. You stand there and take responsibility, because that's the important, like, adult thing to do, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And then we can then talk to them and listen and say, hey, what was going on for you?
Mhm.
How are you feeling? And help, if it's your kids, help them put emotions to their feelings, their words, like words to the emotions. And then you
Mhm.
can teach them about forgiveness and empathy. When you said that to mom, it really hurt my feelings. So we're teaching them empathy. And then we can add that physical touch, like a hug or something, and prayer if we have time, if we can in that moment, to pray with our kids too. So that's kind of the recovery. And that's something that I had to learn as I continue to walk forward.
Mhm.
Something else that the Lord helped me recognize was that reset, and I hear lots of people talking about this. And for me and what I teach, I call it sit and pray. So we're
Mhm.
stopping, and when we start to feel frustrated, immediately stop, start taking some deep breaths, separate. So sit is the stop, separate. I is
Mhm.
the inhale. T is tune in, and then
Mhm.
pray, right? So then while we're
Right.
tuning in, we're validating it's okay that I'm feeling whatever it is I'm feeling, anger, sadness, um, disgust, fear, whatever. We need to be okay with and telling ourselves that, because so often many of us have grown up feeling like it's not okay. Even today as
Mhm.
adults, we can feel like it's not okay to have a negative emotion. And the
Right.
the the point is we have emotions, and we need to learn
Mhm.
how to process them in a healthier way, in a more mature, taking responsibility. And one
Mhm.
of the things to take responsibility is really going, all right, I feel this way, and it's okay that
Mhm.
I feel this way. What
Yeah.
can I do to be productive with this emotion? And we pray and ask the Lord to help us be more productive, give us strength in the moment. And then we can go back and work through recovery with our kids if we need to.
That's so good. I mean, I just recently, I would say, had a couple of the hardest months recently, and it was just processing every emotion I was feeling. I mean, it was just one after another. And immediately, I mean, thank goodness the maturity was there to know, okay, it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to have this emotion. The
Yeah.
worst thing to do is try to stuff it, which I tend to do, where I'm okay, pull up
Hmm.
the bootstraps. I'm good, and just
Yeah.
kind of deny it, avoid it, and then hope that it passes and I don't have to deal with that emotion anymore. But when your world's been rocked and things are coming at you in all different angles and you're a bag of emotions, it's overwhelming. And you
Yeah.
have to accept each emotion that you're going through and tell yourself it's okay to feel this way,
Hmm.
and give it some time and give it over to the Lord. I always say, emotions, feelings, God gave them to us. It's how we respond to them, right? We can either do it the healthy or the unhealthy way. And I think so many of us have either grown up with parents who kind of didn't deal with their emotions, either did sweep it under the rug or reacted in anger and just didn't come to what it is that they were dealing with. So we tend to absorb that as kids, as this is how we do emotions. And then we get to be adults and we're continuing unhealthy patterns. So we have to cut that pattern. And what would you say to that person who just started having kids, that mom that just feels so burnt out, overwhelmed? I know having 3 young kids under the age of 5 just sent me over the edge. And I don't think I told any of the listeners when we started, but you are a life coach and you do have clients and you help them along in those overwhelming, burnt out feelings and destructive anger.
Well, we can kind of go back. If you grew up in a family where, and I commonly hear this, my parents were angry, I didn't have destructive anger, and we should talk about destructive anger and like normal, healthy anger in a minute. But
Mm-hmm.
if you grow up in that environment, that can be just as destructive as far as being able to process emotions in a healthy way, because you're not seeing it. You're not seeing any type of thing. You're either not seeing any emotion or you're seeing big, loud emotion, right? And then
Yeah.
there are those people out there too who, by the grace of God, they've grown up with parents who've been able to help them learn how to process on a healthier level, right? And that's what my
Mm-hmm.
mission is, to help moms do. But anyways, those moms who've come into this and like, man, I was so excited to have kids, had my first kiddo, they started to get into those like twos and beyond, and now I'm yelling and I'm screaming and whatever. Really, it's one of those moments that we set up kind of a pattern in that motherhood place where sometimes we raise our voice, right? We'll be sharp or we'll yell or maybe we'll slap the hand or something, and we're like, ooh, that got a reaction. Ooh, my kiddo listened. And then,
Mm-hmm.
eventually it starts to get louder and louder, and we start to just keep going, right? and
Yeah.
and we start to get into these more destructive phases because they work, they feel
Mm-hmm.
productive, and anger feels productive, worrying feels productive, right? But
Mm-hmm.
really it's not productive, it's destructive when we go down the route of just losing it um to control. And so that takes me into what's the difference between destructive and normal healthy anger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Normal,
So
healthy
good.
anger, that's that feeling, that frustration, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
frustrated, you're irritated, you're starting to feel the temperature rise a bit. And we are going to have an energy release. What happens when you are sad? A lot of people will cry. When you're
Mm-hmm.
disgusted, you might roll your eyes and sigh. Or when you're
Mm-hmm.
afraid, you might have sweaty palms and go through that like stomach ache or something, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
Anger has a physical release too, and we might need to take a deep breath. We might need to, hey, there's a door slam policy in my house. You can slam it once. And all the
Mm-hmm.
jams in our house have a screw through it, because we have all of us girls have blown the door right through it. We're pretty strong, I guess. I don't know, but and it's like if they start doing it repeatedly, then we're like, all right, door's coming off the jam. But
Yeah.
mom has that too. Like if you, yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, just saying, like, you can take a Nerf bat and hit a pillow, do something, or go outside, do some
Mm-hmm.
squats, something like that to really. That's what we end up doing with kids in our consequences. Like, all right, you're doing stairs, up and down the stairs,
Mm-hmm.
or go out and run around the house once or something. Get that energy
Mm-hmm.
out, because it is
Mm-hmm.
normal and we have it. So,
Mm-hmm.
feeling frustrated, having a sharp tone, raising our voice, maybe stomping our foot, that's all going to be normal stuff that moms go through. Every mom is going to raise her voice at one point or another, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the destructive anger that we're using to control and manipulate somebody else, right? Or protect ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
that's when we see more of the rage. We're seeing the screaming. We're seeing the abusive, like spanking or physical abuse. We're seeing even passive aggressive behavior, the silent treatments, snarkiness, belittling. Um, Throwing things, like all of these things that when you do it, is immediately you're like, whoa, what did I
Mm-hmm.
just do? And I can remember times where I would scream and get to this rage point where it felt like it was out of body, like I wasn't even there,
Right.
and
Yeah.
come back to and be like, what just happened to me?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
those are the places we want to avoid. And that's where I'm talking about that sit. separate. Let's have that reset moment. Everybody calm down. If you've been using timeout as a consequence, let's rephrase it. Calm down, separate, sit. I don't care what you say. Mom,
Mhm.
sit and pee. Think about it that way. Go to the bathroom. Yeah, your kiddos
Yeah.
might follow you. Communicate with your kids. Look at them. All right, you
Mhm.
know what? Mama needs a break. You need a break. You can sit on the other side of this door and cry if you need to. I'm going to go on the other side. I'm going to take a few deep
Mhm.
breaths. I'm going to pray. And then when we're both calm, we'll come back to the situation. Talking to
Mhm.
your kids, you can't say enough, even when they're little. Little. Look at your
Mhm.
kiddos. I'm angry right now. It's okay. I'm angry, right? I'm going to need to calm
Mhm.
down. Or, kiddo, I see you're angry right now. It's okay that you're angry. And I want to help you with this, but we have to calm down before we can figure out a solution, right? So these
Mhm.
are just constantly communicating with our kids to help them recognize this is what's going on, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that is so good. 'Cause I remember plenty of times saying, "Mommy needs a break," and I would go in the bathroom and close the door, and if I needed to lock it, I locked it, if they were falling, but usually they knew, "Oh, give mom time," because they were maybe the youngest one would come follow because they didn't understand, but it's crucial that we do take those timeouts and breaks, and for most of the time, the kids will find it kinda silly and funny that mom needs a break and she's going in the
Well,
bathroom, or in the bedroom.
it can be. I've had some people ask me, they're like, "Well, isn't that not okay to separate yourself from your kids?" Or like, that's why we add that communication in. You look at them and you say,
Yeah.
"I'm upset, you're upset," and you kind of help diffuse the situation. You don't want to go straight into consequences with kids, and we threaten those, right? My kids
Mhm.
know if I'm angry enough and I make a threat, like, I've got older kids now. Your phone, you're gonna lose your phone for a week now, if they're sassing at
Mhm.
me and I just kind of check out a little bit, right? I should be
Mhm.
taking a moment, but I'm like, that's it. You're losing your phone for a week. They know that that's not going to fly. They know that once
Mhm.
we both calm down, we come back together, they may lose it for a time, but not an
Mhm.
entire week type of situation. It's
Mhm.
it's working through that moment and really trying to say, "Hey, we're both upset right now. Let's
Mhm.
calm down. We'll come back and talk about it." And then we give consequences at the very end of recovery when the kids are more receptive to hear and we're in a better place to not just start making all these empty threats that some of them we might regret later, right?
Right, right, and let's clarify, when we do our mommy breaks, we don't leave like little babies.
No.
It's like, no, I never did that, but I remember bringing a little baby in the bathroom with me because it was the toddler that I was dealing with, but yeah, we don't wanna put our kids in danger, but
There's definitely moments where with the babies, like with Enya, I mean,
yeah,
there was times where I looked at her and she was crying, and that was in that phase where I had not even started dealing with all this, but
yeah.
God gave me the I don't know, He intervened, and I remember
Mhm,
laying her in her crib because she was just endlessly crying, and I'm like,
mhm,
"This is the safest place for you right now. I'll be back."
mhm.
And I would go in the other room and just scream in my pillow and cry for
Yeah.
like few minutes, 10, 15 minutes, because I was
Mhm,
like, I'm gonna kill this child if I don't calm down right now. And so,
mhm,
and that's the other thing. I really want moms to hear. You are not alone. If you are sitting there going, I have never heard this before. I thought I was the only one. No one ever talks about how angry moms can get behind closed doors. You're not
mhm,
alone. And so often moms are afraid to say anything because they're afraid someone's going to come take their kids away, right? And they don't
mhm.
want to. It's not in their heart that they really want to hurt their children, but they don't know what to do about it. So it's so important to reach out to someone that you can trust to talk to, a pastor, a really close friend. I'm out there. You can find me and talk to me. Find somebody that you can talk to that you feel confident that you can just open up and start working through what you're going through.
Yeah, yeah, and I would suggest too, like, what helped me is once I started, you were saying, pursuing God leads to overcoming, that destructive anger and burnout and overwhelming feelings. And we all know that the word of God and prayer and knowing who God is and who we are and our identity, it all helps us to grow and mature and overcome those, fleshly, sinful things, right? And so one of the things I would suggest too is, praying. I know that, when you're in that anger, just having that be like a knee jerk reaction. We can rewire and retrain our brain to look to crying out to God first, right? And having him help us. And even, as I was finding my personal relationship with the Lord. That was a time where He was helping me deal with those overwhelming feelings. And I remember taking just a verse, and I'm so bad at memorizing verses word by word, but just knowing kind of the concept of a verse, you know what I mean? And having that memorized and scribed in your heart of something that you can immediately go to, that you can memorize, that could help tame down your emotion, whatever it is that you're going through. So I think those things helped as well. And I had to laugh because I'm thinking, oh, well, what do I do now? My kids are all older and I'm such the runner. Like when I'm angry, I just run, right? And then I have my time, with God. And let's just tell everyone here, we can say everything we're feeling to God. I think sometimes people don't feel like they could just scream out because they feel bad. Like, God's not going to want to listen to all my negativity and, how I'm truly feeling, but He really does. That's what he
Well,
wants and desires the most, right?
and it's in that time, right, where I'm talking about sit and pray, where
Mhm.
we're going to him and we're going, I'm so upset right now. I don't want to
Yeah.
calm down. They should have listened to me. And we're saying all the things. I mean, I say all the things. And I may end that going, Lord, I'm sorry I said those things. But he knew where I was in my heart. I was just venting. We're saying things we don't mean. We're saying that we're staying in the moment. We want to really keep ourselves in the moment so we're not going to the rage. And yes, we absolutely want to go to him. And the problem that happens is when we're not focusing on these things, we're not working through the challenges and trying to work through processing in a healthier way, we just get into this mode where we're going, going, going. And
Mhm.
we end up screaming and yelling, getting frustrated. This is the cycle I was in, having these abusive days, not sleeping at night because I felt so guilty and held all the shame, right? And then, like, I'm not going to do it tomorrow, and then doing it again tomorrow. And what was happening was I was letting the guilt and shame consume me, and I wasn't taking it back to the cross. And that daily
Mhm.
walk with the Lord, you daily walk with Him. He makes all things new. You give Him that. You recover with your family. You ask forgiveness from the Lord. And instead of holding on to the burden of how terrible you think you are as a mom, you go to the cross and you hand that over, because otherwise we're just carrying all that guilt and shame when we're looking up at Jesus and telling him it wasn't enough, right? And we
Mhm.
don't want to do that. We want to accept the gift that he gave us.
Mhm.
And yes, you can only do that by having a daily, or a consistent, I know
Mhm.
sometimes it's not always a daily thing, but a consistent walk with him, because we need to hear his voice. And the only way we're going to recognize his voice is if we're actually spending time with him, right?
Yes, that's key. I remember having that quiet time with him in the morning. It became essential when I had kids because it was just so polar opposite from, the morning that I didn't have time with them to the morning that I did. And those mornings that I didn't have my quiet time, those days were just awful. I could see a total difference. So it was worth it to me to get up extra early, have some quiet time with him because I was just a better mom, better wife, better person overall that day. And, hey, he calls it daily bread for a reason. It's
Right.
we need it daily and every hour. So I'd love for you to share a takeaway that you can speak life to the listeners here as we end this episode.
Yeah. So, one thing that we didn't touch too much on, but was the trigger tracker, which
Yeah.
your listeners can go download, Natalie Hixson, and that's Hixson. .com/she speaks life, and they can download the free trigger tracker. And that trigger tracker is going to help them learn to start processing through their emotions. It's going to ask them questions that kind of help them reflect around different situations. You can use it for a one-time trigger that you're like, whoa, I can't believe I got upset over something like that, or a common one like
Mhm.
bedtimes, getting the kids out, interruptions from the kids. I've had clients even use it for like miscarriage and stuff, just to start
Mm.
focusing on what are some of the things that I'm getting triggered on? Why am I getting triggered? And the more we bring awareness to our triggers, the more
Mhm.
we can also recognize when we're walking into them and what's going on for us.
Mhm. That's good. Well, thank you. We'll definitely have that up on the show notes, and I appreciate your transparency here to share your story on that. So, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening today. I trust that God has encouraged you through this message. For more information on this ministry and to access free downloads, please visit my website at jaymeelizabeth.com and sign up. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Jayme Elizabeth She Speaks Life. That's JAYME Elizabeth She Speaks Life. Until next time, my friends, I pray God reveals Himself through your own life story.